Pages is a word processor developed by Apple Inc. It is part of the iWork productivity suite and runs on the macOS, iPadOS, and iOS operating systems. It is also available on iCloud on the web. The first version of Pages was released in February 2005. Pages is marketed by Apple as an easy-to-use application that allows users to quickly create documents on their devices. A number of Apple-designed templates comprising different themes are included with Pages. History: 1976–1980, Founding and Incorporation. Apple Computer Company was founded on April 1, 1976, by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne as a business partnership. The company's first product was the Apple I, a computer designed and hand-built entirely by Wozniak. To finance its creation, Jobs sold his only motorized means of transportation, a VW bus, for a few $100s, and Wozniak sold his HP 65 calculator for $500. Wozniak debuted the first prototype Apple I at the Homebrew Computer Club in July 1976. The Apple I was sold as a motherboard with CPU, RAM, and basic textual video chips, a base kit concept which would not yet be marketed as a complete personal computer. It went on sale soon after debut for $666.66. 180. Wozniak later said he was unaware of the coincidental mark of the beast in the number 666, and that he came up with the price because he liked repeating digits. Apple Computer, Inc. was incorporated on January 3, 1977, without Wayne, who had left and sold his share of the company back to Jobs and Wozniak for $800 only 12 days after having co-founded Apple. Multimillionaire Mike Markkula provided essential business expertise and funding of $250,000 to Jobs and Wozniak during the incorporation of Apple. During the first 5 years of operations, revenues grew exponentially, doubling about every 4 months. Between September 1977 and September 1980, yearly sales grew from $775,000 to $118 million, an average annual growth rate of 533%. The Apple II, also invented by Wozniak, was introduced on April 16, 1977, at the first West Coast Computer Fair. It differed from its major rivals, the TRS-80 and Commodore PET, because of its character cell-based color graphics and open architecture. While the Apple I and early Apple II models used ordinary audio cassette tapes as storage devices, they were superseded by the introduction of a 5+1/4-inch floppy disk drive and interface called the Disk II in 1978. The Apple II was chosen to be the desktop platform for the first killer application of the business world, VisiCalc, a spreadsheet program released in 1979. VisiCalc created a business market for the Apple II and gave home users an additional reason to buy an Apple II: compatibility with the Office. Before VisiCalc, Apple had been a distant third-place competitor to Commodore and Tandy. By the end of the 1970s, Apple had become the leading computer manufacturer in the United States. On December 12, 1980, Apple went public selling 4.6 million shares at $22 per share, generating over $100 million, which was more capital than any IPO since Ford Motor Company in 1956. By the end of the day, 300 millionaires were created, from a stock price of $29 per share and a market cap of $1.778 billion. 1980–1990, success with Macintosh. A critical moment in the company's history came in December 1979 when Jobs and several Apple employees, including human-computer interface expert Jeff Raskin, visited Xerox PARC to see a demonstration of the Xerox Alto, a computer using a graphical user interface. Xerox granted Apple engineers 3 days of access to the Park facilities in return for the option to buy 100,000 shares of Apple at the pre-IPO price of $10 a share. After the demonstration, Jobs was immediately convinced that all future computers would use a graphical user interface, and development of a GUI began for the Apple Lisa, named after Jobs' daughter. The Lisa division would be plagued by infighting, and in 1982 Jobs was pushed off the project. The Lisa launched in 1983 and became the first personal computer sold to the public with a GUI, but was a commercial failure due to its high price and limited software titles. Jobs, angered by being pushed off the Lisa team, took over the company's Macintosh division. Wozniak and Raskin had envisioned the Macintosh as low-cost computer with a text-based interface like the Apple II, but a plane crash in 1981 forced Wozniak to step back from the project. Jobs quickly redefined the Macintosh as a graphical system that would be cheaper than the Lisa, undercutting his former division. Jobs was also hostile to the Apple II division, which at the time, generated most of the company's revenue. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh, the first personal computer to be sold without a programming language. Its debut was signified by 1984, a $1.5 million television advertisement directed by Ridley Scott that aired during the third quarter of Super Bowl XVIII on January 22, 1984. This is now hailed as a watershed event for Apple's success and was called a masterpiece by CNN and one of the greatest TV advertisements of all time by TV Guide. The advertisement created great interest in the original Macintosh, and sales were initially good, but began to taper off dramatically after the first 3 months as reviews started to come in. Jobs had made the decision to equip the original Macintosh with 128 kilobytes of RAM, attempting to reach a $1,000 price point, which limited its speed and the software that could be used. The Macintosh would eventually ship for $2,495, a price panned by critics in light of its slow performance. 195 in early 1985, this sales slump triggered a power struggle between Steve Jobs and CEO John Sculley, who had been hired away from Pepsi 2 years earlier by Jobs, saying, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life or come with me and change the world?" Sculley decided to remove Jobs as the head of the Macintosh division, with unanimous support from the Apple Board of Directors. The Board of Directors instructed Sculley to contain Jobs and his ability to launch expensive forays into untested products. Rather than submit to Sculley's direction, Jobs attempted to oust him from his leadership role at Apple. Informed by Jean-Louis Gassi, Sculley found out that Jobs had been attempting to organize a boardroom coup and called an emergency meeting at which Apple's executive staff sided with Sculley and stripped Jobs of all operational duties. Jobs resigned from Apple in September 1985 and took a number of Apple employees with him to found Next. Wozniak had also quit his active employment at Apple earlier in 1985 to pursue other ventures, expressing his frustration with Apple's treatment of the Apple II division and stating that the company had been going in the wrong direction for the last 5 years. Despite Wozniak's grievances, he officially remained employed by Apple, and to this day continues to work for the company as a representative, receiving a stipend estimated to be $120,000 per year for this role. Both Jobs and Wozniak remained Apple shareholders after their departures. After the departures of Jobs and Wozniak, Sculley worked to improve the Macintosh in 1985 by quadrupling the RAM and introducing the Laser Writer, the first reasonably priced PostScript laser printer. PageMaker, an early desktop publishing application taking advantage of the PostScript language, was also released by Aldus Corporation in July 1985. It has been suggested that the combination of Macintosh, Laser Writer, and PageMaker was responsible for the creation of the desktop publishing market. This dominant position in the desktop publishing market allowed the company to focus on higher price points, the so-called high right policy named for the position on a chart of price versus profits. Newer models selling at higher price points offered higher profit margin, and appeared to have no effect on total sales as power users snapped up every increase in speed. Although some worried about pricing themselves out of the market, the high-right policy was in full force by the mid-1980s, notably due to Jean-Louis Gassie's mantra of 55 or die, referring to the 55% profit margins of the Macintosh II. 7980. This policy began to backfire in the last years of the decade as desktop publishing programs appeared on PC clones that offered some or much of the same functionality of the Macintosh, but at far lower price points. The company lost its dominant position in the desktop publishing market and estranged many of its original consumer customer base who could no longer afford their high-priced products. The Christmas season of 1989 was the first in the company's history to have declining sales, which led to a 20% drop in Apple's stock price, $117–129 during this period. The relationship between Scully and Gassie deteriorated, leading Scully to effectively demote Gassie in January 1990 by appointing Michael Spindler as the chief operating officer. Gassie left the company later that year. 1990–1997, decline and restructuring. The company pivoted strategy and in October 1990 introduced three lower-cost models, the Macintosh Classic, the Macintosh LC, and the Macintosh IISI, all of which saw significant sales due to pent-up demand. In 1991, Apple introduced the hugely successful PowerBook with a design that set the current shape for almost all modern laptops. The same year, Apple introduced System 7, a major upgrade to the Macintosh operating system, adding color to the interface and introducing new networking capabilities. The success of the lower-cost Macs and PowerBook brought increasing revenue. For some time, Apple was doing incredibly well, introducing fresh new products and generating increasing profits in the process. The magazine Mac Addict named the period between 1989 and 1991 as the first golden age of the Macintosh. The success of Apple's lower-cost consumer models, especially the LC, also led to the cannibalization of their higher-priced machines. To address this, management introduced several new brands, selling largely identical machines at different price points, aimed at different markets, the high-end Quadra models, the mid-range Centris line, and the consumer-marketed Performa series. This led to significant market confusion, as customers did not understand the difference between models. The early 1990s also saw the discontinuation of the Apple II series, which was expensive to produce, and the company felt was still taking sales away from lower-cost Macintosh models. After the launch of the LC, Apple began encouraging developers to create applications for Macintosh rather than Apple II, and authorized salespersons to direct consumers towards Macintosh and away from Apple II. The Apple IIE was discontinued in 1993. Throughout this period, Microsoft continued to gain market share with its Windows graphical user interface that it sold to manufacturers of generally less expensive PC clones. While the Macintosh was more expensive, it offered a more tightly integrated user experience, but the company struggled to make the case to consumers. Apple also experimented with a number of other unsuccessful consumer-targeted products during the 1990s, including digital cameras, portable CD audio players, speakers, video game consoles, the eWorld online service, and TV appliances. Most notably, enormous resources were invested in the problem-plagued Newton tablet division, based on John Scully's unrealistic market forecasts. Throughout this period, Microsoft continued to gain market share with Windows by focusing on delivering software to inexpensive personal computers, while Apple was delivering a richly engineered but expensive experience. Apple relied on high profit margins and never developed a clear response. Instead, they sued Microsoft for using a GUI similar to the Apple Lisa in Apple Computer, Inc. v. Microsoft Corp. The lawsuit dragged on for years before it was finally dismissed. The major product flops and the rapid loss of market share to Windows sullied Apple's reputation, and in 1993 Scully was replaced as CEO by Michael Spindler. With Spindler at the helm, Apple, IBM, and Motorola formed the AIM Alliance in 1994 with the goal of creating a new computing platform, which would use IBM and Motorola hardware coupled with Apple software. The AIM Alliance hoped that Prep's performance and Apple's software would leave the PC far behind and thus counter the dominance of Windows. The same year, Apple introduced the Power Macintosh, the first of many Apple computers to use Motorola's Power PC processor. In the wake of the alliance, Apple opened up to the idea of allowing Motorola and other companies to build Macintosh clones. Over the next 2 years, 75 distinct Macintosh clone models were introduced. However, by 1996 Apple executives were worried that the clones were cannibalizing sales of their own high-end computers, where profit margins were highest. In 1996, Spindler was replaced by Gil Amelio as CEO. Hired for his reputation as a corporate rehabilitator, Amelio made deep changes, including extensive layoffs and cost-cutting. This period was also marked by numerous failed attempts to modernize the Macintosh operating system. The original Macintosh operating system was not built for multitasking. The company attempted to correct this by introducing cooperative multitasking in System 5, but the company still felt it needed a more modern approach. This led to the Pink Project in 1988. A/UX that same year, Copeland in 1994, and the attempted purchase of BEOS in 1996. Talks with B stalled when the CEO, former Apple executive Jean-Louis Gassi, demanded $300 million instead of the $125 million Apple wanted to pay. Only weeks away from bankruptcy, Apple's board decided Next Step was a better choice for its next operating system and purchased Next in late 1996 for $400 million, bringing back Apple co-founder Steve Jobs. 1997–2007, return to profitability. The Next acquisition was finalized on February 9, 1997, and the board brought Jobs back to Apple as an advisor. On July 9, 1997, Jobs staged a boardroom coup that resulted in Amelio's resignation after overseeing a 3-year record low stock price and crippling financial losses. The board named Jobs as interim CEO and he immediately began a review of the company's products. Jobs would order 70% of the company's products to be cancelled, resulting in the loss of 3,000 jobs, and taking Apple back to the core of its computer offerings. The next month, in August 1997, Steve Jobs convinced Microsoft to make a $150 million investment in Apple and a commitment to continue developing software for the Mac. The investment was seen as an antitrust insurance policy for Microsoft, who had recently settled with the Department of Justice over anti-competitive practices. Jobs also ended the Mac clone deals and in September 1997, purchased the largest clone maker, Power Computing. On November 10, 1997, Apple introduced the Apple Store website, which was tied to a new build-to-order manufacturing that had been successfully used by PC manufacturer Dell. The moves paid off for Jobs. At the end of his first year as CEO, the company turned a $309 million profit. On May 6, 1998, Apple introduced a new all-in-one computer reminiscent of the original Macintosh, the iMac. The iMac was a huge success for Apple, selling 800,000 units in its first 5 months and ushered in major shifts in the industry by abandoning legacy technologies like the 3+1 2-inch diskette, being an early adopter of the USB connector, and coming pre-installed with Internet connectivity via Ethernet and a dial-up modem. The device also had a striking eardrop shape and translucent materials, designed by Jonathan Ive, who, although hired by Amelio, would go on to work collaboratively with Jobs for the next decade to chart a new course, the design of Apple's products. A little more than a year later, on July 21, 1999, Apple introduced the iBook, a laptop for consumers. It was the culmination of a strategy established by Jobs to produce only 4 products: refined versions of the Power Macintosh G3 desktop and PowerBook G3 laptop for professionals, along with the iMac desktop and iBook laptop for consumers. Jobs felt the small product line allowed for a greater focus on quality and innovation. At around the same time, Apple also completed numerous acquisitions to create a portfolio of digital media production software for both professionals and consumers. Apple acquired of Macromedia's KeyGrip digital video editing software project, which was renamed Final Cut Pro when it was launched on the retail market in April 1999. The development of KeyGrip also led to Apple's release of the consumer video editing product iMovie in October 1999. Next, Apple successfully acquired the German company Astart in April 2000, which had developed the DVD authoring software DV Director, which Apple would sell as the professional-oriented DVD Studio Pro software product, and used the same technology to create iDVD for the consumer market. In 2000, Apple purchased the SoundJam MP audio player software from Cassidy and Green. Apple renamed the program iTunes, while simplifying the user interface and adding the ability to burn CDs. 2001 would be a pivotal year for the Apple, with the company making 3 announcements that would change the course of the company. The first announcement came on March 24, 2001, that Apple was nearly ready to release a new modern operating system, macOS X. The announcement came after numerous failed attempts in the early 1990s, and several years of development. macOS X was based on NextStep, OpenStep, and BSD Unix, with Apple aiming to combine the stability, reliability, and security of Unix with the ease of use afforded by an overhauled user interface, heavily influenced by NextStep. To aid users in migrating from Mac OS 9, the new operating system allowed the use of OS 9 applications within Mac OS X via the Classic environment. In May 2001, the company opened its first 2 Apple Store retail locations in Virginia and California, offering an improved presentation of the company's products. At the time, many speculated that the stores would fail, but they went on to become highly successful, and the first of more than 500 stores around the world. On October 23, 2001, Apple debuted the iPod portable digital audio player. The product, which was first sold on November 10, 2001, was phenomenally successful with over 100 million units sold within 6 years. In 2003, Apple's iTunes Store was introduced. The service offered music downloads for 99 cents a song and integration with the iPod. The iTunes Store quickly became the market leader in online music services, with over 5 billion downloads by June 19, 2008. 2 years later, the iTunes Store was the world's largest music retailer. In 2002, Apple purchased Nothing Real for their advanced digital compositing application Shake, as well as eMagic for the music productivity application Logic. The purchase of eMagic made Apple the first computer manufacturer to own a music software company. The acquisition was followed by the development of Apple's consumer-level GarageBand application. The release of iPhoto in the same year completed the iLife suite. At the Worldwide Developers Conference keynote address on June 6, 2005, Jobs announced that Apple would move away from PowerPC processors, and the Mac would transition to Intel processors in 2006. On January 10, 2006, the new MacBook Pro and iMac became the first Apple computers to use Intel's Core Duo CPU. By August 7, 2006, Apple made the transition to Intel chips for the entire Mac product line over 1 year sooner than announced. The Power Mac, iBook, and PowerBook brands were retired during the transition. The Mac Pro, MacBook, and MacBook Pro became their respective successors. On April 29, 2009, The Wall Street Journal reported that Apple was building its own team of engineers to design microchips. Apple also introduced Boot Camp in 2006 to help users install Windows XP or Windows Vista on their Intel Macs alongside macOS X. Apple's success during this period was evident in its stock price. Between early 2003 and 2006, the price of Apple's stock increased more than tenfold, from around $6 per share to over $80. When Apple surpassed Dell's market cap in January 2006, Jobs sent an email to Apple employees saying Dell CEO Michael Dell should eat his words. 9 years prior, Dell had said that if he ran Apple he would shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders. 2007-2011, Success with Mobile Devices. During his keynote speech at the Macworld Expo on January 9, 2007, Jobs announced that Apple Computer, Inc. would thereafter be known as Apple Incorporated, because the company had shifted its emphasis from computers to consumer electronics. This event also saw the announcement of the iPhone and the Apple TV. The company sold 270,000 iPhone units during the first 30 hours of sales, and the device was called a game changer for the industry. In an article posted on Apple's website on February 6, 2007, Jobs wrote that Apple would be willing to sell music on the iTunes Store without digital rights management, thereby allowing tracks to be played on third-party players, if record labels would agree to drop the technology. On April 2, 2007, Apple and EMI jointly announced the removal of DRM technology from EMI's catalog in the iTunes Store, effective in May 2007. Other record labels eventually followed suit, and Apple published a press release in January 2009 to announce that all songs on the iTunes Store are available without their Fairplay DRM. In July 2008, Apple launched the App Store to sell third-party applications for the iPhone and iPod Touch. Within a month, the store sold 60 million applications and registered an average daily revenue of $1 million, with Jobs speculating in August 2008 that the App Store could become a billion-dollar business for Apple. By October 2008, Apple was the third-largest mobile handset supplier in the world due to the popularity of the iPhone. On January 14, 2009, Jobs announced in an internal memo that he would be taking a 6-month medical leave of absence from Apple until the end of June 2009 and would spend the time focusing on his health. In the email, Jobs stated that the curiosity over my personal health continues to be a distraction not only for me and my family, but everyone else at Apple as well, and explained that the break would allow the company to focus on delivering extraordinary products. Though Jobs was absent, Apple recorded its best non-holiday quarter during the recession with revenue of $8.16 billion and profit of $1.21 billion. After years of speculation and multiple rumored leaks, Apple unveiled a large-screen, tablet-like media device known as the iPad on January 27, 2010. The iPad ran the same touch-based operating system as the iPhone, and all iPhone apps were compatible with the iPad. This gave the iPad a large app catalog on launch, though having very little development time before the release. Later that year, on April 3, 2010, the iPad was launched in the US. It sold more than 300,000 units on its first day, and 500,000 by the end of the first week. In May of the same year, Apple's market cap exceeded that of competitor Microsoft for the first time since 1989. In June 2010, Apple released the iPhone 4, which introduced video calling using FaceTime, multitasking, and a new uninsulated stainless steel design that acted as the phone's antenna. Later that year, Apple again refreshed its iPod line of MP3 players by introducing a multi-touch iPod Nano, an iPod Touch with FaceTime, and an iPod Shuffle that brought back the click wheel buttons of earlier generations. It also introduced the smaller, cheaper second-generation Apple TV, which allowed renting of movies and shows. On January 17, 2011, Jobs announced in an internal Apple memo that he would take another medical leave of absence for an indefinite period to allow him to focus on his health. Chief Operating Officer Tim Cook assumed Jobs' day-to-day operations at Apple, although Jobs would still remain involved in major strategic decisions. Apple became the most valuable consumer-facing brand in the world. In June 2011, Jobs surprisingly took the stage and unveiled iCloud, an online storage and syncing service for music, photos, files, and software which replaced MobileMe, Apple's previous attempt at content syncing. This would be the last product launch Jobs would attend before his death. On August 24, 2011, Jobs resigned his position as CEO of Apple. He was replaced by Cook and Jobs became Apple's chairman. Apple did not have a chairman at the time and instead had two CEO lead directors, Andrea Jung and Arthur D. Levinson, who continued with those titles until Levinson replaced Jobs as chairman of the board in November after Jobs' death. 2011 present, post-Jobs era, Cook's leadership. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs died, marking the end of an era for Apple. The first major product announcement by Apple following Jobs' passing occurred on January 19, 2012, when Apple's Phil Schiller introduced iBooks textbooks for iOS and iBook Author for macOS X in New York City. Jobs stated in the biography Jobs that he wanted to reinvent the textbook industry and education. From 2011 to 2012, Apple released the iPhone 4s and iPhone 5, which featured improved cameras, an intelligent software assistant named Siri, and cloud-synced data with iCloud, the third and fourth generation iPads, which featured Retina displays, and the iPad mini, which featured a 7.9-inch screen in contrast to the iPad's 9.7-inch screen. These launches were successful, with the iPhone 5 becoming Apple's biggest iPhone launch with over 2 million pre-orders and sales of 3 million iPads in 3 days following the launch of the iPad mini and fourth-generation iPad. Apple also released a third-generation 13-inch MacBook Pro with a Retina display and new iMac and Mac mini computers. On August 20, 2012, Apple's rising stock price increased the company's market capitalization to a then-record $624 billion. This beat the non-inflation-adjusted record for market capitalization previously set by Microsoft in 1999. On August 24, 2012, a U.S. jury ruled that Samsung should pay Apple $1.05 billion in damages in an intellectual property lawsuit. Samsung appealed the damages award, which was reduced by $450 million and further granted Samsung's request for a new trial. On November 10, 2012, Apple confirmed a global settlement that dismissed all existing lawsuits between Apple and HTC up to that date, in favor of a 10-year license agreement for current and future patents between the two companies. It is predicted that Apple will make $280 million a year from this deal with HTC. In May 2014, the company confirmed its intent to acquire Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovini's audio company Beats Electronics, producer of the Beats by Dr. Dre line of headphones and speaker products, and operator of the music streaming service Beats Music, for $3 billion, and to sell their products through Apple's retail outlets and resellers. Iovini believed that Beats had always belonged with Apple, as the company modeled itself after Apple's unmatched ability to marry culture and technology. The acquisition was the largest purchase in Apple's history. During a press event on September 9, 2014, Apple introduced a smartwatch, the Apple Watch. Initially, Apple marketed the device as a fashion accessory and a complement to the iPhone, that would allow people to look at their smartphones less. Over time, the company has focused on developing health and fitness-oriented features on the watch, in an effort to compete with dedicated activity trackers. In January 2016, it was announced that 1 billion Apple devices were in active use worldwide. On June 6, 2016, Fortune released Fortune 500, their list of companies ranked on revenue generation. In the trailing fiscal year, Apple appeared on the list as the top tech company. It ranked third, overall, with $233 billion in revenue. This represents a movement upward of 2 spots from the previous year's list. In June 2017, Apple announced the HomePod, its smart speaker aimed to compete against Sonos, Google Home, and Amazon Echo. Towards the end of the year, TechCrunch reported that Apple was acquiring Shazam, a company that introduced its products at WWDC and specializing in music, TV, film, and advertising recognition. The acquisition was confirmed a few days later, reportedly costing Apple $400 million, with media reports noting that the purchase looked like a move to acquire data and tools bolstering the Apple Music streaming service. The purchase was approved by the European Union in September 2018. Also in June 2017, Apple appointed Jamie Ehrlicht and Zach Van Ambig to head the newly formed Worldwide Video Unit. In November 2017, Apple announced it was branching out into original scripted programming, a drama series starring Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, and a reboot of the anthology series Amazing Stories with Steven Spielberg. In June 2018, Apple signed the Writers Guild of America's Minimum Basic Agreement and Oprah Winfrey to a multi-year content partnership. Additional partnerships for original series include Sesame Workshop and DHX Media and its subsidiary Peanuts Worldwide, as well as a partnership with A24 to create original films. During the Apple special event in September 2017, the AirPower wireless charger was announced alongside the iPhone X, 8 and Watch Series 3. The AirPower was intended to wirelessly charge multiple devices, simultaneously. Though initially set to release in early 2018, the AirPower would be cancelled in March 2019, marking the first cancellation of a device under Cook's leadership. On August 19, 2020, Apple's share price briefly topped $467.77, making Apple the first U.S. company with a market capitalization of $2 trillion. During its annual WWDC keynote speech on June 22, 2020, Apple announced it would move away from Intel processors, and the Mac would transition to processors developed in-house. The announcement was expected by industry analysts, and it has been noted that Macs featuring Apple's processors would allow for big increases in performance over current Intel-based models. On November 10, 2020, the MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini became the first Mac devices powered by an Apple-designed processor, the Apple M1. In April 2022, it was reported that Samsung Electromechanics would be collaborating with Apple on its M2 chip instead of LG Innotek. Developer logs showed that at least 9 Mac models with 4 different M2 chips were being tested. The Wall Street Journal reported that an effort to develop its own chips left Apple better prepared to deal with the semiconductor shortage that emerged during the pandemic era and led to increased profitability, with sales of Mac computers that included M1 chips rising sharply in 2020 and 2021. It also inspired other companies like Tesla, Amazon, and Meta Platforms to pursue a similar path. In April 2022, Apple opened an online store that allowed anyone in the US to view repair manuals and order replacement parts for specific recent iPhones, although the difference in cost between this method and official repair is anticipated to be minimal. In May 2022, a trademark was filed for RealityOS, an operating system reportedly intended for virtual and augmented reality headsets, first mentioned in 2017. According to Bloomberg, the headset may come out in 2023. Further insider reports state that the device uses iris scanning for payment confirmation and signing into accounts. On June 18, 2022, the Apple Store in Towson, Maryland became the first to unionize in the U.S., with the employees voting to join the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. On July 7, 2022, Apple announced launching a new security feature called the Lockdown Mode. Lockdown Mode will be available in fall along with the new operating system, and it will serve as protection for high-risk users against spyware cyber attacks. Products. Mac. Mac, historically known as Macintosh, is Apple's line of personal computers that use the company's proprietary macOS operating system. Personal computers were Apple's original business line, but as of the end of 2021 they account for only about 10% of the company's revenue. The company is in the process of switching Mac computers from Intel processors to Apple Silicon, a custom-designed system on a chip platform. As of March 2022, there are 6 Mac computer families in production. iMac, consumer all-in-one desktop computer, introduced in 1998. Mac Mini, consumer sub-desktop computer, introduced in 2005. MacBook Pro, professional notebook, introduced in 2006. Mac Pro, professional workstation, introduced in 2006. MacBook Air, consumer ultra-thin notebook, introduced in 2008. Mac Studio, professional small form factor workstation, introduced in 2022. Apple also sells a variety of accessories for Macs, including the Pro Display XDR, Apple Studio Display, Magic Mouse, Magic Trackpad, and Magic Keyboard. The company also develops several pieces of software that are included in the purchase price of a Mac, including the Safari web browser, the iMovie video editor, the GarageBand audio editor and the iWork productivity suite. Additionally, the company sells several professional software applications including the Final Cut Pro video editor, Motion for video animations, the Logic Pro audio editor, MainStage for live audio production, and Compressor for media compression and encoding. iPhone. iPhone is Apple's line of smartphones that use the company's proprietary iOS operating system, derived from macOS's kernel. The first-generation iPhone was announced by then Apple CEO Steve Jobs on January 9, 2007. Since then, Apple has annually released new iPhone models and iOS updates. The iPhone has a user interface built around a multi-touch screen, which at the time of its introduction was described as revolutionary and a game-changer for the mobile phone industry. The device has been credited with popularizing the smartphone and slate form factor, and with creating a large market for smartphone apps, or app economy. iOS is one of the 2 largest smartphone platforms in the world alongside Android. The iPhone has generated large profits for the company, and is credited with helping to make Apple one of the world's most valuable publicly traded companies. As of the end of 2021, the iPhone accounts for more than half of the company's revenue. As of July 2022, 33 iPhone models have been produced, with 5 smartphone families in current production. iPhone 14, iPhone 14 Pro, iPhone SE, iPhone 13, iPhone 12, iPad. iPad is Apple's line of tablet computers that use the company's proprietary iPadOS operating system, derived from macOS and iOS. The first-generation iPad was announced on January 27, 2010. The iPad took the multi-touch user interface first introduced in the iPhone, and adapted it to a larger screen. It was marketed for interaction with multimedia formats including newspapers, books, photos, videos, music, documents, video games, and most existing iPhone apps. Earlier generations of the iPad used the same iOS operating system as the company's smartphones before being split off to iPadOS in September 2019. As of September 2020, Apple has sold more than 500 million iPads, though sales peaked in 2013. The iPad still remains the most popular tablet computer by sales as of the second quarter of 2020, and accounted for 9% of the company's revenue as of the end of 2021. In recent years, Apple has started offering more powerful versions of the device, with the current iPad Pro using the same M1 Apple silicon as the company's high-end Macs and laptops, along with a smaller version of the device called the iPad mini, and an upgraded version called iPad Air. As of October 2022, there are 5 iPad models in production: iPad, iPad, iPad mini, iPad Pro, iPad Air. Wearables, home, and accessories. Apple also makes several other products that it categorizes as wearables, home, and accessories. These products include the AirPods line of wireless headphones, Apple TV digital media players, Apple Watch smartwatches, Beats headphones, and HomePod mini smart speakers. As of the end of 2021, this broad line of products comprises about 11% of the company's revenues. Software. Apple offers a range of software for its hardware products, some of which are bundled with its products while others are available for purchase. These include macOS, iOS, iBooks, Pages, Numbers, Keynote, iMovie, GarageBand, Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, Xcode, Safari, Time Machine, and many more. Services. Apple also offers a broad line of services that it earns revenue on, including advertising in the App Store and Apple News app, the AppleCare and Extended Warranty Plan, the iCloud and cloud-based data storage service, payment services through the Apple Card credit card and the Apple Pay processing platform, digital content services including Apple Books, Apple Fitness Plus, Apple Music, Apple News Plus, Apple TV Plus, and the iTunes Store. As of the end of 2021, services comprise about 19% of the company's revenue. Many of the services have been launched since 2019, when Apple announced it would be making a concerted effort to expand its service revenues. Corporate identity. Logo. According to Steve Jobs, the company's name was inspired by his visit to an apple farm while on a fruitarian diet. Jobs thought the name Apple was fun, spirited, and not intimidating. Apple's first logo, designed by Ron Wayne, depicts Sir Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree. It was almost immediately replaced by Rob Janoff's rainbow apple, the now familiar rainbow-colored silhouette of an apple with a bite taken out of it. Janoff presented Jobs with several different monochromatic themes for the bitten logo, and Jobs immediately took a liking to it. However, Jobs insisted that the logo be colorized to humanize the company. The logo was designed with a bite so that it would not be confused with a cherry. The colored stripes were conceived to make the logo more accessible, and to represent the fact the Apple II could generate graphics in color. This logo is often erroneously referred to as a tribute to Alan Turing, with the bite mark a reference to his method of suicide. Both Janoff and Apple deny any homage to Turing in the design of the logo. On August 27, 1999, Apple officially dropped the rainbow scheme and began to use monochromatic logos nearly identical in shape to the previous rainbow incarnation. An aqua-themed version of the monochrome logo was used from 1998 to 2003, and a glass-themed version was used from 2007 to 2013. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were fans of the Beatles, but Apple Incorporated had name and logo trademark issues with Apple Corps Limited, a multimedia company started by the Beatles in 1968. This resulted in a series of lawsuits and tension between the two companies. These issues ended with the settling of their lawsuit in 2007. Advertising. Apple's first slogan, "Bite into an apple," was coined in the late 1970s. From 1997 to 2002, the slogan "Think Different" was used in advertising campaigns, and is still closely associated with Apple. Apple also has slogans for specific product lines. For example, "I think, therefore iMac" was used in 1998 to promote the iMac, and "Say hello to iPhone" has been used in iPhone advertisements. Hello was also used to introduce the original Macintosh, Newton, iMac, and iPod. From the introduction of the Macintosh in 1984, with the 1984 Super Bowl advertisement to the more modern "Get a Mac" adverts, Apple has been recognized for its efforts towards effective advertising and marketing for its products. However, claims made by later campaigns were criticized, particularly the 2005 Power Mac ads. Apple's product advertisements gained a lot of attention as a result of their eye-popping graphics and catchy tunes. Musicians who benefited from an improved profile as a result of their songs being included on Apple advertisements include Canadian singer Feist with the song 1234 and Yael Naim with the song New Soul. Brand loyalty. Apple customers gained a reputation for devotion and loyalty early in the company's history. In 1984, Byte stated that there are two kinds of people in the world: people who say Apple isn't just a company, it's a cause, and people who say Apple isn't a cause, it's just a company. Both groups are right. Nature has suspended the principle of non-contradiction where Apple is concerned. Apple is more than just a company because its founding has some of the qualities of myth. Apple is two guys in a garage undertaking the mission of bringing computing power, once reserved for big corporations, to ordinary individuals with ordinary budgets. The company's growth from two guys to a billion-dollar corporation exemplifies the American dream. Even as a large corporation, Apple plays David to IBM's Goliath, and thus has the sympathetic role in that myth. Apple evangelists were actively engaged by the company at one time, but this was after the phenomenon had already been firmly established. Apple evangelist Guy Kawasaki has called the brand fanaticism something that was stumbled upon, while I've explained in 2014 that people have an incredibly personal relationship with Apple's products. Apple Store openings and new product releases can draw crowds of hundreds, with some waiting in line as much as a day before the opening. The opening of New York City's Apple Fifth Avenue store in 2006 was highly attended, and had visitors from Europe who flew in for the event. In June 2017, a newlywed couple took their wedding photos inside the then recently opened Orchard Road Apple store in Singapore. The high level of brand loyalty has been criticized and ridiculed, applying the epithet Apple fanboy and mocking the lengthy lines before a product launch. An internal memo leaked in 2015 suggested the company planned to discourage long lines and direct customers to purchase its products on its website. Fortune magazine named Apple the most admired company in the United States in 2008, and in the world from 2008 to 2012. On September 30, 2013, Apple surpassed Coca-Cola to become the world's most valuable brand in the Omnicom Group's Best Global Brands report. Boston Consulting Group has ranked Apple as the world's most innovative brand every year since 2005. The New York Times in 1985 stated that Apple above all else is a marketing company. John Sculley agreed, telling the Guardian newspaper in 1997 that people talk about technology, but Apple was a marketing company. It was the marketing company of the decade. Research in 2002 by NetRatings indicate that the average Apple consumer was usually more affluent and better educated than other PC company consumers. The research indicated that this correlation could stem from the fact that on average Apple Incorporated products were more expensive than other PC products. In response to a query about the devotion of loyal Apple consumers, Jonathan Ive responded, "What people are responding to is much bigger than the object. They are responding to something rare, a group of people who do more than simply make something work, they make the very best products they possibly can." It's a demonstration against thoughtlessness and carelessness. As of January 2021, there are 1.65 billion Apple products in active use. Headquarters and major facilities. Apple Inc.'s world corporate headquarters are located in Cupertino, in the middle of California's Silicon Valley, at Apple Park, a massive circular ground scraper building with a circumference of 1 mile. The building opened in April 2017 and houses more than 12,000 employees. Apple co-founder Steve Jobs wanted Apple Park to look less like a business park and more like a nature refuge, and personally appeared before the Cupertino City Council in June 2011 to make the proposal, in his final public appearance before his death. Apple also operates from the Apple Campus, a grouping of 6 buildings in Cupertino that total 850,000 square feet located about 1 mile to the west of Apple Park. The Apple Campus was the company's headquarters from its opening in 1993, until the opening of Apple Park in 2017. The buildings, located at 16 Infinite Loop, are arranged in a circular pattern around a central green space, in a design that has been compared to that of a university. In addition to Apple Park and the Apple Campus, Apple occupies an additional 30 office buildings scattered throughout the city of Cupertino, including 3 buildings that also served as prior headquarters: Stevens Creek 3, Bandley 1, and Mariani 1. In total, Apple occupies almost 40% of the available office space in the city. Apple's headquarters for Europe, the Middle East and Africa are located in Cork in the south of Ireland, called the Holly Hill Campus. The facility, which opened in 1980, houses 5,500 people and was Apple's first location outside of the United States. Apple's international sales and distribution arms operate out of the campus in Cork. Apple has 2 campuses near Austin, Texas. A 216,000 square foot campus opened in 2014 houses 500 engineers who work on Apple Silicon, and a 1.1 million square foot campus opened in 2021 where 6,000 people to work in technical support, supply chain management, online store curation, and Apple Maps data management. The company also has several other locations in Boulder, Colorado, Culver City, California, Hertleya, London, New York, Pittsburgh, San Diego, and Seattle that each employ hundreds of people. Stores. The first Apple stores were originally opened as 2 locations in May 2001 by then CEO Steve Jobs, after years of attempting but failing store-within-a-store concepts. Seeing a need for improved retail presentation of the company's products, he began an effort in 1997 to revamp the retail program to get an improved relationship to consumers, and hired Ron Johnson in 2000. Jobs relaunched Apple's online store in 1997, and opened the first 2 physical stores in 2001. The media initially speculated that Apple would fail, but its stores were highly successful, bypassing the sales numbers of competing nearby stores, and within 3 years reached $1 billion in annual sales, becoming the fastest retailer in history to do so. Over the years, Apple has expanded the number of retail locations and its geographical coverage, with 499 stores across 22 countries worldwide as of December 2017. Strong product sales have placed Apple among the top-tier retail stores, with sales over $16 billion globally in 2011. In May 2016, Angela Arendts, Apple's then Senior Vice President of Retail, unveiled a significantly redesigned Apple Store in Union Square, San Francisco, featuring large glass doors for the entry, open spaces, and rebranded rooms. In addition to purchasing products, consumers can get advice and help from creative pros, individuals with specialized knowledge of creative arts, get product support in a tree-lined Genius Grove, and attend sessions, conferences, and community events, with Arendts commenting that the goal is to make Apple stores into town squares, a place where people naturally meet up and spend time. The new design will be applied to all Apple stores worldwide, a process that has seen stores temporarily relocate or close. Many Apple stores are located inside shopping malls, but Apple has built several standalone flagship stores in high-profile locations. It has been granted design patents and received architectural awards for its stores' designs and construction, specifically for its use of glass staircases and cubes. The success of Apple stores have had significant influence over other consumer electronics retailers, who have lost traffic, control, and profits due to a perceived higher quality of service and products at Apple stores. Apple's notable brand loyalty among consumers causes long lines of hundreds of people at new Apple Store openings or product releases. Due to the popularity of the brand, Apple receives a large number of job applications, many of which come from young workers. Although Apple Store employees receive above-average pay, are offered money toward education and health care, and receive product discounts, there are limited or no paths of career advancement. A May 2016 report with an anonymous retail employee highlighted a hostile work environment with harassment from customers, intense internal criticism, and a lack of significant bonuses for securing major business contracts. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Apple closed its stores outside China until March 27, 2020. Despite the stores being closed, hourly workers continue to be paid. Workers across the company are allowed to work remotely if their jobs permit it. On March 24, 2020, in a memo, Senior Vice President of People and Retail Deirdre O'Brien announced that some of its retail stores are expected to reopen at the beginning of April. Corporate affairs. Corporate culture. Apple is one of several highly successful companies founded in the 1970s that bucked the traditional notions of corporate culture. Jobs often walked around the office barefoot even after Apple became a Fortune 500 company. By the time of the 1984 television advertisement, Apple's informal culture had become a key trait that differentiated it from its competitors. According to a 2011 report in Fortune, this has resulted in a corporate culture more akin to a startup rather than a multinational corporation. In a 2017 interview, Wozniak credited watching Star Trek and attending Star Trek conventions while in his youth as a source of inspiration for his CEO founding Apple. As the company has grown and been led by a series of differently opinionated chief executives, it has arguably lost some of its original character. Nonetheless, it has maintained a reputation for fostering individuality and excellence that reliably attracts talented workers, particularly after jobs return to the company. Numerous Apple employees have stated that projects without Jobs' involvement often took longer than projects with it. To recognize the best of its employees, Apple created the Apple Fellows program, which awards individuals who make extraordinary technical or leadership contributions to personal computing while at the company. The Apple Fellowship has so far been awarded to individuals including Bill Atkinson, Steve Capps, Rod Holt, Alan Kay, Guy Kawasaki, Al Alcorn, Don Norman, Rich Page, Steve Wozniak, and Phil Schiller. At Apple, employees are intended to be specialists who are not exposed to functions outside their area of expertise. Jobs saw this as a means of having best-in-class employees in every role. For instance, Ron Johnson, Senior Vice President of Retail Operations until November 1, 2011, was responsible for site selection, in-store service, and store layout, yet had no control of the inventory in his stores. This was done by Tim Cook, who had a background in supply chain management. Apple is known for strictly enforcing accountability. Each project has a directly responsible individual, or DRI in Apple jargon. As an example, when iOS Senior Vice President Scott Forstall refused to sign Apple's official apology for numerous errors in the redesigned Maps app, he was forced to resign. Unlike other major U.S. companies, Apple provides a relatively simple compensation policy for executives that does not include perks enjoyed by other CEOs like country club fees or private use of company aircraft. The company typically grants stock options to executives every other year. In 2015, Apple had 110,000 full-time employees. This increased to 116,000 full-time employees the next year, a notable hiring decrease, largely due to its first revenue decline. Apple does not specify how many of its employees work in retail, though its 2014 SEC filing put the number at approximately half of its employee base. In September 2017, Apple announced that it had over 123,000 full-time employees. Apple has a strong culture of corporate secrecy, and has an anti-leak global security team that recruits from the National Security Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the United States Secret Service. In December 2017, Glassdoor said Apple was the 48th best place to work, having originally entered at rank 19 in 2009, peaking at rank 10 in 2012, and falling down the ranks in subsequent years. Lack of innovation. Manufacturing and assembling. The company's manufacturing, procurement, and logistics enable it to execute massive product launches without having to maintain large, profit-sapping inventories. In 2011, Apple's profit margins were 40%, compared with between 10 and 20% for most other hardware companies. Cook's catchphrase to describe his focus on the company's operational arm is, "Nobody wants to buy sour milk." In May 2017, the company announced a $1 billion funding project for advanced manufacturing in the United States, and subsequently invested $200 million in Corning Incorporated, a manufacturer of toughened Gorilla Glass technology used in its iPhone devices. The following December, Apple's chief operating officer, Jeff Williams, told CNBC that the $1 billion amount was absolutely not the final limit on its spending, elaborating that "We're not thinking in terms of a fund limit. We're thinking about, where are the opportunities across the U.S. to help nurture companies that are making the advanced technology and the advanced manufacturing that goes with that quite frankly is essential to our innovation." As of 2021, Apple uses components from 43 countries. The majority of assembling is done by Taiwanese original design manufacturer firms Foxconn, Pegatron, Wistron, and Compal Electronics, with factories mostly located inside China, but also Brazil, and India. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Co. is a pure-play semiconductor manufacturing company. They make the majority of Apple's smartphone SoCs, with Samsung Semiconductor playing a minority role. Apple alone accounted for over 25% of TSMC's total income in 2021. Apple's Bionic lineup of smartphone SoCs are currently made exclusively by TSMC from the A7 Bionic onwards. Previously, manufacturing was shared with Samsung. The M series of Apple SoC for consumer computers and tablets is made by TSMC as well. During the Mac's early history, Apple generally refused to adopt prevailing industry standards for hardware, instead creating their own. This trend was largely reversed in the late 1990s, beginning with Apple's adoption of the PCI bus in the 7500/8500/9500 Power Macs. Apple has since joined the industry standards groups to influence the future direction of technology standards such as USB, AGP, Hypertransport, Wi-Fi, NVMe, PCIe, and others in its products. FireWire is an Apple-originated standard that was widely adopted across the industry after it was standardized as IEEE 1394 and is a legally mandated port in all cable TV boxes in the United States. Apple has gradually expanded its efforts in getting its products into the Indian market. In July 2012, during a conference call with investors, CEO Tim Cook said that India, but that Apple saw larger opportunities outside the region. India's requirement that 30% of products sold be manufactured in the country was described as really adds cost to getting product to market. In May 2016, Apple opened an iOS app development center in Bangalore and a Maps development office for 4,000 staff in Hyderabad. In March, The Wall Street Journal reported that Apple would begin manufacturing iPhone models in India over the next 2 months, and in May, the journal wrote that an Apple manufacturer had begun production of iPhone SE in the country, while Apple told CNBC that the manufacturing was for a small number of units. In April 2019, Apple initiated manufacturing of iPhone 7 at its Bengaluru facility, keeping in mind demand from local customers even as they seek more incentives from the Government of India. At the beginning of 2020, Tim Cook announced that Apple schedules the opening of its first physical outlet in India for 2021, while an online store is to be launched by the end of the year. Labor practices. Environmental practices and initiatives. Apple Energy. Energy and resources. Toxins. Green bonds. Finance. Apple is the world's largest technology company by revenue, the world's largest technology company by total assets, and the world's second largest mobile phone manufacturer after Samsung. In its fiscal year ending in September 2011, Apple Incorporated reported a total of $108 billion in annual revenues, a significant increase from its 2010 revenues of $65 billion and nearly $82 billion in cash reserves. On March 19, 2012, Apple announced plans for a $2.65 per share dividend beginning in fourth quarter of 2012, per approval by their board of directors. The company's worldwide annual revenue in 2013 totaled $170 billion. In May 2013, Apple entered the top 10 of the Fortune 500 list of companies for the first time, rising 11 places above its 2012 ranking to take the 6th position. As of 2016, Apple has around $234 billion of cash and marketable securities, of which 90% is located outside the United States for tax purposes. Apple amassed 65% of all profits made by the 8 largest worldwide smartphone manufacturers in Q1 of 2014. According to a report by Canaccord Genuity. In the first quarter of 2015, the company garnered 92% of all earnings. On April 30, 2017, The Wall Street Journal reported that Apple had cash reserves of $250 billion, officially confirmed by Apple as specifically $256.8 billion a few days later. As of August 3, 2018, Apple was the largest publicly traded corporation in the world by market capitalization. On August 2, 2018, Apple became the first publicly traded U.S. company to reach a $1 trillion market value. Apple was ranked number 4 on the 2018 Fortune 500 rankings of the largest United States corporations by total revenue. Tax practices. Litigation. Apple has been a participant in various legal proceedings and claims since it began operation. In particular, Apple is known for and promotes itself as actively and aggressively enforcing its intellectual property interests. Some litigation examples include Apple v. Samsung, Apple v. Microsoft, Motorola Mobility v. Apple Incorporated, and Apple Corp v. Apple Computer. Apple has also had to defend itself against charges on numerous occasions of violating intellectual property rights. Most have been dismissed in the courts as shell companies known as patent trolls, with no evidence of actual use of patents in question. On December 21, 2016, Nokia announced that in the US and Germany, it has filed a suit against Apple, claiming that the latter's products infringe on Nokia's patents. Most recently, in November 2017, the United States International Trade Commission announced an investigation into allegations of patent infringement in regards to Apple's remote desktop technology. AquaConnect, a company that builds remote desktop software, has claimed that Apple infringed on 2 of its patents. In January 2022, Ericsson sued Apple over payment of royalty of 5G technology. Privacy stance. Apple has a notable pro-privacy stance, actively making privacy-conscious features and settings part of its conferences, promotional campaigns, and public image. With its iOS 8 mobile operating system in 2014, the company started encrypting all contents of iOS devices through users' passcodes, making it impossible at the time for the company to provide customer data to law enforcement requests seeking such information. With the popularity rise of cloud storage solutions, Apple began a technique in 2016 to do deep learning scans for facial data in photos on the user's local device and encrypting the content before uploading it to Apple's iCloud storage system. It also introduced differential privacy, a way to collect crowdsourced data from many users, while keeping individual users anonymous, in a system that Wired described as trying to learn as much as possible about a group while learning as little as possible about any individual in it. Users are explicitly asked if they want to participate, and can actively opt in or opt out. With Apple's release of an update to iOS 14, Apple required all developers of iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch applications to directly ask iPhone users permission to track them. The feature, titled App Tracking Transparency, received heavy criticism from Facebook, whose primary business model revolves around the tracking of users' data and sharing such data with advertisers so users can see more relevant ads, a technique commonly known as targeted advertising. Despite Facebook's measures, including purchasing full-page newspaper advertisements protesting app tracking transparency, Apple released the update in mid-spring 2021. A study by Verizon subsidiary Flurry Analytics reported only 4% of iOS users in the United States and 12% worldwide have opted into tracking. However, Apple aids law enforcement in criminal investigations by providing iCloud backups of users' devices, and the company's commitment to privacy has been questioned by its efforts to promote biometric authentication technology in its newer iPhone models, which don't have the same level of constitutional privacy as a passcode in the United States. Prior to the release of iOS 15, Apple announced new efforts at combating child sexual abuse material on iOS and Mac platforms. Parents of minor iMessage users can now be alerted if their child sends or receives nude photographs. Additionally, on-device hashing would take place on media destined for upload to iCloud, and hashes would be compared to a list of known abusive images provided by law enforcement. If enough matches were found, Apple would be alerted and authorities informed. The new features received praise from law enforcement and victims' rights advocates. However, privacy advocates, including the Electronic Frontier Foundation, condemned the new features as invasive and highly prone to abuse by authoritarian governments. Charitable causes. Apple is a partner of RED, a fundraising campaign for AIDS charity. In November 2014, Apple arranged for all App Store revenue in a 2-week period to go to the fundraiser, generating more than $20 million, and in March 2017, it released an iPhone 7 with a red color finish. Apple contributes financially to fundraisers in times of natural disasters. In November 2012, it donated $2.5 million to the American Red Cross to aid relief efforts after Hurricane Sandy, and in 2017 it donated $5 million to relief efforts for both Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey, as well as for the 2017 Central Mexico earthquake. The company has also used its iTunes platform to encourage donations in the wake of environmental disasters and humanitarian crises, such as the 2010 Haiti earthquake, the 2011 Japan earthquake, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines in November 2013, and the 2015 European migrant crisis. Apple emphasizes that it does not incur any processing or other fees for iTunes donations, sending 100% of the payments directly to relief efforts, though it also acknowledges that the Red Cross does not receive any personal information on the users donating and that the payments may not be tax deductible. On April 14, 2016, Apple and the Worldwide Fund for Nature announced that they have engaged in a partnership to help protect life on our planet. Apple released a special page in the iTunes App Store, Apps for Earth. In the arrangement, Apple has committed that through April 24, WWF will receive 100% of the proceeds from the applications participating in the App Store via both the purchases of any paid apps and the in-app purchases. Apple and WWF's Apps for Earth campaign raised more than $8 million in total proceeds to support WWF's conservation work. WWF announced the results at WWDC 2016 in San Francisco. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Apple CEO Cook announced that the company will be donating millions of masks to health workers in the United States and Europe. On January 13, 2021, Apple announced a $100 million racial equity and justice initiative to help combat institutional racism worldwide. Leadership. Current Board of Directors. As of October 26, 2019, the Board of Directors of Apple Incorporated includes Arthur D. Levinson, Tim Cook, James A. Bell, Al Gore, Andrea Jung, Ronald Sugar, Susan Wagner. Current Executive Management. As of March 16, 2021, the management of Apple Incorporated includes Tim Cook, Jeff Williams, Luca Maestri, Catherine L. Adams, Eddie Q, Craig Federighi, John Giannandrea, Deirdre O'Brien, John Turnus, Greg Josewak, Johnny Srigi, Sabi Khan, Lisa P. Jackson, Isabel G. E. Mahay, Tor Miran, Adrian Perica. List of Chief Executives: Michael Scott, Mike Markula, John Scully, Michael Spindler, Gil Amelio, Steve Jobs, Tim Cook. List of Chairmen. The role of Chairman of the Board has not always been in use, notably, between 1981 and 1985, and 1997 to 2011. Mike Markula, Steve Jobs, Mike Markula, second term. John Scully, Mike Markula, third term. Steve Jobs, second term. Arthur D. Levinson. Criticism and controversies. Apple has been criticized for alleged anti-competitive behavior, rash litigation, dubious tax tactics, the use of sweatshop labor, customer service issues involving allegedly misleading warranties and insufficient data security, and its products' environmental footprint. Apple has also received criticism for its willingness to work and conduct business with nations such as China and Russia, engaging in practices that have been criticized by human rights groups. Critics have claimed that Apple products combine stolen or purchased designs that Apple claims are its original creations. It has been criticized for its alleged collaboration with the U.S. surveillance program PRISM. The company denied any collaboration. Products and services. Apple's issues regarding music over the years include those with the European Union regarding iTunes, trouble over updating the Spotify app on Apple devices and collusion with record labels. In 2018-19, Apple faced criticism for its failure to approve NVIDIA web drivers for GPUs installed on legacy Mac Pro machines. Without access to Apple-approved NVIDIA web drivers, Apple users faced replacing their NVIDIA cards with graphic cards produced by supported brands, from a list of recommendations provided by Apple to its consumers. In June 2019, Apple issued a recall for its 2015 MacBook Pro Retina 15 following reports of batteries catching fire. The recall affected 432,000 units, and Apple was criticized for the long waiting periods consumers experienced, sometimes extending up to 3 weeks for replacements to arrive. The company also did not provide alternative replacements or repair options. In July 2019, following a campaign by the Right to Repair movement, challenging Apple's tech repair restrictions on devices, the FTC held a workshop to establish the framework of a future nationwide right to repair rule. The movement argues Apple is preventing consumers from legitimately fixing their devices at local repair shops, which is having a negative impact on consumers. On November 19, 2020, it was announced that Apple will be paying out $113 million related to lawsuits stemming from their iPhone's battery problems and subsequent performance slowdowns. Apple continues to face litigation related to the performance throttling of iPhone 6 and 7 devices, an action that Apple argued was done in order to balance the functionality of the software with the impacts of a chemically aged battery. On January 25, 2021, Apple was hit with another lawsuit from an Italian consumer group, with more groups to follow, despite the rationale for the throttling. On November 30, 2020, the Italian antitrust authority AGCM fined Apple $12 million for misleading trade practices. AGCM stated that Apple's claims of the iPhone's water resistance weren't true, as the phones could only resist water up to 4 meters deep in ideal laboratory conditions and not in regular circumstances. The authority added that Apple provided no assistance to customers with water-damaged phones, which it said constituted an aggressive trade practice. On September 8, 2022, Brazil announced the ban on the sale of iPhones without power adapters. It has also fined Apple $12.275 million. Apple announced it will appeal this decision. Privacy. Ireland's Data Protection Commission also launched a privacy investigation to examine whether Apple complied with the EU's GDPR law following an investigation into how the company processes personal data with targeted ads on its platform. In December 2019, a report found that the iPhone 11 Pro continues tracking location and collecting user data even after users have disabled location services. In response, an Apple engineer said the location services icon appears for system services that do not have a switch in settings. According to published reports by Bloomberg News on March 30, 2022, Apple turned over data such as phone numbers, physical addresses, and IP addresses to hackers posing as law enforcement officials using forged documents. The law enforcement requests sometimes included forged signatures of real or fictional officials. When asked about the allegations, an Apple representative referred the reporter to a section of the company policy for law enforcement guidelines, which stated, "We review every data request for legal sufficiency and use advanced systems and processes to validate law enforcement requests and detect abuse." Antitrust. The United States Department of Justice also began a review of big tech firms to establish whether they could be unlawfully stifling competition in a broad antitrust probe in 2019. On March 16, 2020, France fined Apple €1.1 billion for colluding with two wholesalers to stifle competition and keep prices high by handicapping independent resellers. The arrangement created aligned prices for Apple products such as iPads and personal computers for about half the French retail market. According to the French regulators, the abuses occurred between 2005 and 2017 but were first discovered after a complaint by an independent reseller, eBizCus, in 2012. On August 13, 2020, Epic Games, the maker of the popular game Fortnite, sued Apple and Google after its hugely popular video game was removed from Apple and Google's App Store. The suits come after both Apple and Google blocked the game after it introduced a direct payment system, effectively shutting out the tech titans from collecting fees. In September 2020, Epic Games founded the Coalition for App Fairness together with other 13 companies, which aims for better conditions for the inclusion of apps in the app stores. Later in December 2020, Facebook agreed to assist Epic in their legal game against Apple, planning to support the company by providing materials and documents to Epic. Facebook had, however, stated that the company will not participate directly with the lawsuit, although did commit to helping with the discovery of evidence relating to the trial of 2021. In the months prior to their agreement, Facebook had been dealing with feuds against Apple relating to the prices of paid apps as well as privacy rule changes. Head of ad products for Facebook Dan Levy commented, saying that this is not really about privacy for them, this is about an attack on personalized ads and the consequences it's going to have on small business owners, commenting on the full-page ads placed by Facebook in various newspapers in December 2020. Politics. In January 2020, U.S. President Donald Trump and Attorney General William P. Barr criticized Apple for refusing to unlock 2 iPhones of a Saudi national, Mohammed Saeed al-Shamrani, who shot and killed 3 American sailors and injured 8 others in the Naval Air Station Pensacola. The shooting was declared an act of terrorism by the FBI, but Apple denied the request to crack the phones to reveal possible terrorist information, citing its data privacy policy. Apple Incorporated, shareholders increased pressure on the company to publicly commit to respect freedom of expression as a human right, upon which Apple committed to freedom of expression and information in its human rights policy document. It said that the policy is based on the guidelines of the United Nations on Business and Human Rights. In early September 2020. In 2021, Apple complied with a request by the Chinese government to ban a Quran app from its devices and platforms. The request occurred in the context of the Chinese government's ongoing mass repression of Muslims, particularly Uyghurs, in Xinjiang, which some have labeled a genocide. In December 2021, the information reported that CEO Tim Cook had negotiated in 2016 a 5-year agreement with the Chinese government, motivated in part to allay regulatory issues that had harmed the company's business in China. The agreement entailed promised investments totaling $275 billion. In September 2021, Apple removed an app from its App Store created by Alexei Navalny meant to coordinate protest voting during the 2021 Russian legislative election. The Russian government had threatened to arrest individual Apple employees working in the country unless Apple complied. See also: List of Apple Incorporated media events. Pixar.